are kicking it in the chat and whatnot and like asking us questions. I mean, but hey, I know it's live, but we got to talk for a second. I know that like the audio thing is messing up and the Cecil like takes a couple seconds and cuts it out. But since we're live now, we'll go ahead and hop on into it because this is one of my first times hosting the show and I'm panicking, but I know everybody else in the fantasy world might also be panicking because Clyde Edwards-Helaire, running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, not really doing it for the first couple of weeks. So here on the Mailbag Show, one of the first questions that we got was concerning CEH and what are we supposed to do with it? I mean, Victoria, I'll kick it over to you first. I mean, if you've got CEH or even if you avoided him in drafts, like what are you doing as of right now?
I did avoid him in most places, but let's say if you have him, let's start with the bad, right? So 51 running backs have 10 or more carries through these last 2 weeks. Clyde is in that 51. He ranks 51st in PFF rushing grade. He ranks 49th in elusive rating, and he ranks 50th in yards after contact. That is horrible. He's had 3 total targets in these last 2 weeks. Going forward, I'd say he's a low-end RB2, and that sounds horrible based off of where you might have drafted him, right? He's still averaging about 69% of the snaps. Nice, right? That's fine, but his inability to find the end zone is just that's reminiscent of last year. That was one of the things last year that hurt his floor very badly. He couldn't get into the end zone. He had the 16th most touches last year and only turned it into 5 touchdowns. I mean, it was just bad. Those red zone opportunities are not coming. If I have him, I'm looking to somehow hope he still has name value. He still has Kansas City team value and see if you can package him. Because if you wait until this week to say, okay, maybe he has a better performance this week, you risk that because he has a pretty tough matchup against the Chargers, I believe. So I'm just looking to package him and get anything I can.
I think that makes sense. I think that's a fine approach. I mean, Troy, would you be offering the same like type of package? Are you trying to move off him as much as you can? Because I think those games might come for him at some point, almost like the same way we're thinking some of those Ezekiel Elliott games might come in the future for him too. But either way, if you're staring down the barrel of a 1-2, 0-3 start after CEH really hasn't gotten it done, what are you doing with him at this point?
So first I want to make mention, right? Everybody's forgetting that CH, he had an ankle sprain during the preseason. A lot of people are forgetting this, right? So it's not that that has a lot to do with his elusive rating. It's hard to be elusive when you're coming off, your hurt ankle, right? So to me, I believe that CEH is going to bounce back. He's not going to be like, he's not going to be worthy of like the top 5 pick from last year, right? He's not going to be the a superstar running back. He's not going to be an RB1, right? If you're expecting CEH an RB1, then yes, it's very much so time to panic.
Sure.
But if you believe that he's going to be, if you believe he's going to be more of a mid RB2, low end RB2, then I think he's fine. I think he's fine where he is, but you just have to know what he is going forward. And to me, I really truly believe that he'll be okay. But look, if you could package him to get a better running back, then you absolutely should upgrade. But at the end of the day, so yeah, if you can upgrade. But I just think that some people are a little bit too, freaking out a bit. And Dynasty, you should definitely buy him, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I think that might be the best path moving forward because at least we know for him, he should at least have the opportunity. Are we really expecting, from a dynasty perspective, are we expecting Darrell Williams to be kicking around that roster over the next couple of years? The same thing for Jerick McKinnon, where he's at in his career. So I understand that from a dynasty perspective, but I know it's week 2. Some folks might have some issue moving forward with with what we're going to expect for the Chiefs moving forward, and we still have literally 3-4 months ahead of us in terms of how much football, how many more weeks we have in front of us. And I would say the one thing that I would put in front of folks to give them some level of optimism, I mean, look at those defenses that they've just played against. I mean, those are 2 strong defensive rushing attacks or the rush defenses that they just faced in the past 2 weeks. So, and also, if I'm remembering correctly, I forget it was Chris Collinsworth or Al Michaels mentioned during the broadcast that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he actually had his best receiving game against the Baltimore Ravens last year. I think he went for something 7 for 60 last year. It was the best receiving line that CEH had all season. And the Ravens remembered that. And if you watch some of the defensive coverage that he received coming out of the backfield, they were spying him throughout most of the routes that he was running. So if Patrick Mahomes just didn't want to go that way and he wound up dumping it off to other guys that he thought might get them farther down the field because the Ravens were responding to Edwards-Helaire coming out of the backfield, again, that might be, I might be trying to be a bit too optimistic because I am one of those folks that actually did draft CEH in round 2, and I'm trying to buy in as much as I possibly can. He is running the most routes out of any of the running backs. He should have the majority of the workload from a running back perspective. But if Patrick Mahomes isn't checking down to those running backs, right now, according to JJ Zacharyson, running backs for the Kansas City Chiefs are only averaging about an 8% target share to begin with. And typically that's been up to around like 17, 18% historically since Mahomes has been the Chiefs starting quarterback. If that ticks up, then sure, maybe there might be better days ahead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But for a guy that we drafted in the second round that we're expecting to see those RB1 numbers, just not seeing it right now. So I can understand why some folks might want to move on. And of course, with that being said, we're going to have to move on as well. It's the Mailbag Show. I'm your host, Chris Allen, filling in for Dave Kluge, who's on assignment this week. I'm joined by the wonderful Victoria, the verified Troy King. Here to come and talk with y'all tonight and answer your questions. So really appreciate y'all coming and checking us out tonight. And so for those that are interested, if you want to get your questions answered on this show, just a reminder, send your questions to mailbag@footballguys.com. We take those. Victoria, typically she'll send out a tweet maybe a couple days beforehand. Drop your questions there. We'll load them up, try and answer them as quickly as we can, and get the advice that you need in order to win your leagues, because that's what we do here at Football Guys. So every Wednesday night, 7:30, I might not be in the driver's seat. It might be Dave. You might get Kluge'd, and he'll be the one kind of leading the charge. But either way, between this show, the Audible, any of the other, the Dynasty newsletter that I'm a part of with Adam Wilde, any other show that's a part of the Football Guys Network, that's what we've got here. We got the content to try and help you navigate through this 17-game season that we've got going ahead of y'all. So let's go ahead and hop right on into it here. All right, so next question that we've got, all right, from Dave Wright. What's up with Brandon Aiyuk? Did he not purchase any of Shanahan's Kids Girl Scout cookies? Is he droppable? Man, I don't know about all that. Troy, I'll kick it to you first. Are you completely out on Aiyuk at this point? Is it just Deebo Samuel season, or how are you approaching him, man?
It is Deebo Samuel season. So they're not mutually exclusive. It's Deebo Samuel season. He is the wide receiver 1 on the team. But no, Brandon Aiyuk is not droppable. Not yet, right? I'll give him 2 more weeks. If he's still bad after week 4, drop him. He gonna live on the waiver wire. Look, it's been a nice life. See you later. But after 2 weeks, nah, it's just too early. He was dealing with some injuries in the preseason as well. I truly believe that he has the ability. Because look, are we dropping George Kittle? He's been terrible too, right? So that you can make that argument. So I think you should be a little bit more patient on Brandon Aiyuk. I'm not ready to drop him yet.
All right. I'm not ready to drop him either. This is a guy that, he's got the draft capital, right? That first round draft capital that we look for in wide receivers. He came out the gate having a few decent games, after he spent some time with a similar injury to start his rookie season. So I still have hope that Shanahan lets him out of the doghouse. But Victoria, how are you approaching Aiyuk at this point?
Yeah, this is tough. I definitely wouldn't be dropping him. You could be also looking to package him in a trade here. For me, I thought there has to be someone in your league maybe that missed out on Aiyuk because you drafted him and they just have a soft spot for him in their heart. Maybe they had him last year, he popped off for them, and they're like, maybe you can use that to your advantage to try to package him to someone like that in your league. I know I have someone in my league that I could probably do that with, to be honest. But there's good and bad, right? He's coming back from this hamstring injury. He only played 54% of the snaps. That's just not enough to get you the score that you need in your lineup to get those targets. Will this change? Probably. It's highly likely. So I think I'd either hold, as Troy said, or try to package him to someone that might be willing to take him off your hands here. But I'm hoping we see better days for Brandon Aiyuk. The 49ers are just a headache, though, so far this year to have on your roster. So maybe you don't want to deal with the headache anymore.
No, I think I can totally understand that. So with that being said, if anybody else has any other questions or whatever, or folks want to get into some more contests of Victoria, how would folks get into some of that if they were interested?
Oh, absolutely. If you love fantasy football, listen up. You have to join this NFL season's hottest and easiest daily contest. You can flex on the competition in FanUp's daily flex ball contest to win cash and the hottest brand prizes, of course. It combines the best of redraft and best ball formats. There's no salary caps, drafts, or waivers. FanUp allows you to pick a new team daily and stack your roster however you like. And you could take me on, you could take us on head to head. You can sign up right now. Enter before Thursday night football, Sunday games, and Monday night football each week to win fan up bonus prizes from Fanatics and battle against me, against any of the football guys all season long. Follow your friends, talk smack, the best part. See if you can beat them and then get paid while doing it. Download the Fan Up app now in the Apple App Store or go to fanup.app. Just be fans.
I love it. I love it. So if anybody wants to take advantage of that, I mean, get their flex on. I mean, I like that, Victoria. You actually like flexing like while you're doing it too. I dig it. But go ahead and do that. For folks that want to also like have any questions that while we're doing, I see some folks like talking in the chat right now. Drop some more questions there. We'll roll through as many as we can from the actual mailbag from the folks that sent them in to the email address. But I see some of y'all talking in the chat. If you got questions, drop them in there and we'll hit those up like closer to the end of the show. But we've got a couple others that we want to get through as quickly as possible. Actually, this comes from a familiar name. Mr. Kluge himself happened to ask us a question. He's got a start one, 3 guys that are going this weekend. So we've got Cole Beasley going up against Washington, Devontae Parker against the Raiders, who are coming out hot this season so far, and then Tyler Boyd against Pittsburgh. Victoria, I'll kick it back to you. I mean, out of those 3 guys, I mean, who actually sticks out to you?
So we'll start in order. Cole Beasley is always going to give you a semi-safe floor. In week 1, he had 13 targets, which was nuts. He went 8 for 60 yards. Week 2, only 4 targets. Was a kind of a fluky week against the Dolphins, 4 for 36. In terms of Devontae Parker, I don't think I'd be starting any Dolphins wide receiver right now with the news that Tua has fractured ribs. I'm so sorry, Troy. I truly am, though. It's just a bummer to see that today. I mean, you're hoping for maybe a long play from Jacoby Brissett, the backup quarterback, but I'm really looking not to start, especially with Will Fuller coming back in the lineup this week. I'm really not looking to start Parker. And Tyler Boyd, he's been a little wishy-washy through 2 weeks. In week 1, that was not a great floor there. I think he finished maybe 6 PPR points. Last week, it was a little bit better, 7 for 73, but this matchup against Pittsburgh is pretty gross. He might be the beneficiary, though. He might be the beneficiary as the third odd man out, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins garnering a lot more of the coverage. So I think I might lean Boyd here. I mean, it's either Boyd, maybe I'll lean Beasley. Maybe I'll give Beasley the edge because of Pittsburgh's defense. I had Washington ranked as the number 1 overall defense for this year, and I know a lot of other people did. I'll take the L there. They have not looked great. That secondary is just getting just annihilated week in and week out. So actually, I'll maybe give Beasley the edge here.
All right. Now, I was getting happy for a second because you were leaning toward Tyler Boyd, and like that's Cincinnati's my team. But all right, I understand. Now, Troy, I know that you have to agree we can't really advocate for starting Devontae Parker this week. I know that's your team and whatnot. So it really does come down to Cole Beasley or Tyler Boyd, I think would be the right choices if you had to make a choice. So between Beasley and Boyd, where's your head at?
I'm going to go Tyler Boyd. And
yeah, that's my man right there.
Yeah. So here's the thing with Cole Beasley, right? If you want a very nice, boring floor, you could go Cole Beasley. Sometimes you can have a big game, but overall, it's like he doesn't have much upside. Tyler Boyd, he's also more of a safe option, but we saw last week 7 for 73. That's a good line. I'll take that line anytime. And last week was one of the few weeks that Chase, Boyd, as well as T. Higgins, they all performed well for fantasy. So Joe Burrow, and again, you don't get that a lot from most teams. So I know that Pittsburgh's a tougher matchup, but kind of like Victoria was saying, I think he's a beneficiary of the fact that he gets to play with Higgins and Chase. The coverage is going to be mainly on them, and then I think Boyd's going to probably get lighter coverage, and I think he's going to be benefiting from that. So and if this was my team and I'm looking at my lineup, I have a really hard time playing Cole Beasley over Tyler Boyd. So give me Tyler Boyd.
I want to hear from Chris, because that game, sure, the box score, all 3 receivers last week looked fine, but the game was
yeah.
Woo, like that had me worried. I've told a lot of people to play Jamar Chase, and I'm like, oh boy, I saw 3 interceptions in the last 3 attempts. I'm like, oh my gosh.
No, I was watching that game live, and I'm actually, for folks that don't know, we're actually the video crew here at Footballguys. We're putting out like just these shorts, like every day. We're putting out these 2 5-minute just analysis videos and try and like pack as much as we can into like that bit of time on whatever topic. And my topic last week was actually Tyler Boyd. I might have advocated for you to sit Tyler Boyd last week. I might be holding the L for that quite possibly, but 7 for 73. I mean, that's a pretty decent stat line for Boyd. He does have the higher target share over 2 weeks over Cole Beasley. I think about 23% to 21%. But my concern, like you laid out, Victoria, is like the Bengals like play calling as of right now. It's no surprise that actually, if you look at Vegas betting odds, Zach Taylor has like the highest odds to be the first coach fired in the NFL, like after last week. The Bengals sit at 31st in pass rate over expectation. That's after last season when they were top 5, top 6 in neutral passing rate, pass rate over expectation, so on and so forth. And so it's just, I know they want to get Joe Mixon running. I know they want to get that run game going. I know they want to try and protect Joe Burrow, but you've got just these 3 excellent pass catchers, and not using them just doesn't make any sense to me. I do not understand it. So while I do lean Boyd, I mean, y'all can check the hat behind me. Like the Bengals, that's my team. I live an hour away from Cincinnati, but I do understand like why folks might go to Cole Beasley, because at least with Beasley, you've got Josh Allen, who we've actually seen be a QB1 before, and Joe Burrow, he's an unknown, at least from a quarterback perspective, because we only got him for 8, 9, 10 weeks last year. So I get it. I do lean Tyler Boyd. I will go ahead and just claim myself being the homer, but I can understand why folks do that. But I think we can all agree we're not starting Devontae Parker this week. We can't do it. We can't do it. I mean, if you're attached to Jacoby Brissett and an offensive line that just essentially got their quarterback killed last week, but we can't do it. All right. So moving on to our next question here on the Mailbag Show tonight. So looking at, this comes from Sam Taylor. I mean, should we be concerned about Kenny G? I mean, for all intents and purposes, I mean, the Giants offense doesn't look that bad. Now, I know Kenny G popped up on the injury report today, I believe with a hip injury, if I'm remembering correctly. I mean, so Troy, I'll kick it back to you. I mean, Kenny G, I mean, are you buying into some of this, like this Giants offense, that passing offense, or, I mean, you're going to pass for the time being?
I'm not too concerned about Kenny G just yet. I don't like what I've seen, but I believe it's too early to panic. They brought him there for a reason. Now it's just a question of, is he the wide receiver 1? Sterling Shepard is the wide receiver 1 on the team, and it's been proven. But at the same time, they're trying to get Kenny G involved. As Daniel Jones and him don't have that connection yet, right? It's a new team. He was hurt during the preseason as well, so I think that might be part of why they don't have the chemistry yet. But I believe, in a couple of weeks, we might see that connection, be a little bit more solid. And I believe that Kenny G, again, he's not going to be a wide receiver 1. It all depends on what your expectations are. I think he could be a wide receiver 2. If you're expecting him to wide receiver 2, I think that he could eventually get there. Look, Daniel Jones, he's balling out for fantasy, right? He's a QB5. He's like QB5, I think, on the season right now.
QB5.
Yeah, exactly.
Ridiculous.
So
yeah.
when you have QB5 on the season, it's hard to count out your quote unquote wide receiver 1 already. So I'm not going to fall off. I don't like what I've seen, but I'm not going to just jump ship just yet. It's way too early.
No, and I think that's fair. I mean, this is a wide receiver that switched teams during the offseason, missed essentially the entire offseason, like with injury, didn't have time to really get in sync with his quarterback. I think logically it kind of makes sense that he should have some of those big games. I mean, Victoria, I mean, are you on that same train? I mean, just give it some more time and Kenny G will get there, or are you just like giving him the nah wave, can't do it?
This is another player I don't have many shares of, just from the preseason and all the injury reports, and I think it was his hamstring then, and now we see him yelling on the sideline. That was exciting to see. Yeah. And then he's got to come out and be like, I wasn't yelling at Daniel Jones. Okay, sir. I don't know. I'm with you guys. I'm not all the way worried yet, but I just don't think if your expectation is where you drafted him to be maybe a wide receiver 2, low end wide receiver 2, I think he'll maybe do that a handful of times this entire season. He doesn't have that ceiling. Sterling Shepard is Daniel Jones' go-to. We've seen this the last 2 weeks now. He has the highest ceiling on the team, and I don't think I could trust Kenny G for the next couple of weeks. Maybe I will say, he had 8 targets last week, only 3 catches, but Daniel Jones just missed him on a couple of long balls. So I think we'll see them link up soon on one of those long balls. But you're looking for that big play with Kenny G right now, and he doesn't excite me. So I am a little worried to start him, but.
Yeah, I think as of right now, like Sterling Shepard clearly ahead of him in terms of like target share, like on the Giants. I mean, the Giants, like while they're about league average in terms of pass rate over expectation, really like all of that value has just centered on Daniel Jones because he's essentially unlocked that, or he's now become the Konami code quarterback of 2021. I mean, dude has back-to-back games with a rushing touchdown. He's just, if I'm remembering correctly, he's 8 points behind Tom Brady in terms of like quarterback fantasy scoring right now, which is ridiculous to say because Tom Brady has, smoked both teams like back-to-back weeks. So I don't know. I'm kind of the mindset that they'll get it together at some point, assuming this hip injury thing isn't going to have him sidelined or keep him out or whatever. But regardless, I mean, I do kind of agree with you, Troy, that they brought him there for a reason. They'll get it on track at some point. It's just, when will that be? If it's not going to be this week against Atlanta, which is probably one of their easier matchups, like moving forward, when's it going to be? I mean, when can we expect that to happen? Although they do play the Cowboys a couple of times, so that might happen then. So we'll see. All right. So moving on. I mean, our next question will go from the NFC East, down south to Florida, looking at the Jacksonville offense coming from Davis Pang. I mean, how do y'all feel about the Jacksonville offense after 2 weeks? I mean, outside of Marvin Jones, really can't rely on too many folks for fantasy production. He says he's treating them like the 2020 Jets, which I don't know if we're quite there yet, but I can understand the pessimism. I mean, so Victoria, Jacksonville, is it just Marvin Jones and nobody else? You're not really. Carlos Hyde, no. James Robinson, no. How are you feeling about Jacksonville at this point?
You don't think they're almost at the Jets?
I don't know. Is it really that bad? Is it that bad? I don't know.
The difference is I think Trevor Lawrence can and likely will improve as the year goes on. We've talked on the show so much about Urban Meyer and how he's just a big question mark, and it's shown through the first 2 weeks of the year with this offense. I was mostly in on Marvin Jones. I know Troy is a Chark guy. I feel like we bet something last week on Chark or Jones or Visca or something.
It wasn't on Jones because I like Jones, but keep going.
Okay, all right. We'll have to bring that up another time. But I put out a tweet this week too, like, I regret taking 1 share of Laviska Shenault because I'm in my final redraft draft, and I'm sitting there, and all the Laviska truthers are popping in my head in their tweets, and I'm like, am I going to regret not having any shares? And I click draft, and now I'm like, wow. Mm-hmm. Though he had a large target share, both him and Jones have had a good target share, and even Chark the last couple weeks, but they're just not good targets. So I'm not looking to have confidence in starting anyone at this point outside of Marvin Jones. Even I'm hoping James Robinson bounces back. His carry share and things like that increased in week 2, but his target share is still not there. So I'm really only comfortable starting Marvin Jones right now. I don't even know if you could trade these guys unless like you have a Visca Truther in your league again, but they probably drafted him. So I don't know. I don't know about it. I can't trust anyone outside of Marvin.
No, I can't either. James Robinson, if folks, unless you're from Jacksonville and like you're just a hard like Jaguars truther, go back and watch some of those James Robinson carries. The dude kind of looked a little bit slow, not gonna lie. So I'd say that outside of Marvin Jones, I really can't trust like anybody in that offense. But Troy, how are you looking at the Jaguars at this point?
Let me enlighten you guys for a second. Yes, Marvin Jones is the wide receiver 1 on the team. I agree with everything what y'all said about James Robinson, right? He's not the James, this year's James Robinson. James Robinson is definitely not this year's James Robinson. So we can get that out of the way. Again, he's splitting too much time with Carlos Hyde. I don't like that. In terms of the receivers, both Shenault and Chark have received 16 targets within the last on the season, right? So they're averaging 8 targets a game. They have about a 20% target share. That is perfectly fine, guys. And again, if you're seeing that, because the Jaguars are about 6th in the league in passing attempts. So, and we know their defense is bad, which means that the Jaguars are going to have to pass a lot, which means that both Shenault and DJ Chark are going to be reliable. I won't say reliable, but they're going to be very involved in the offense. So you want them in fantasy. Shenault has a lower ADOT, so for PPR, you might be thinking about Shenault because he might be safer. DJ Chark has, he got a lot of air yards. He's hard, and Lawrence is targeting him down the field, so he has a chance to hit the big plays. But I like Shenault better than I like Chark, and I like Marvin Jones better than all of them. But I just don't want to write them off too fast. They're getting the targets. They're in a very pass-heavy offense. Don't write them off just yet. They're not like the 2020 Jets because you didn't want any pieces of the 2020 Jets. That's want the passing game for the Jaguars because at least Trevor Lawrence is competent and he's going to eventually be a good quarterback, and they're throwing a lot. So Trevor Lawrence, I see you with the hand, Victoria. Look, if somebody who gets give me a wide receiver who's averaging 8 targets a game on a bad team that has to throw, I'll take him on my fantasy team.
8 targets for Visca, but I think, what was it, 3?
No. It's 3 catches for Chark. Chark barely caught anything, but he's getting the targets. So that's the problem. He's not catching them, but he's getting the targets.
Yes, I would say that's probably the only thing that I could say would be a positive for Visca. But those short targets, man, we're going to need to see something a bit deeper or something like that, or see him more used in the red zone, something along those lines.
He's Cole Beasley right now.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, he is fancy Cole Beasley, with a much larger price tag, to be quite honest. But to your point, Troy, look at who the Jaguars are supposed to play like over the next few weeks. I mean, this week they got Arizona. They're going to be passing like this week against Arizona. And then after that, they've got Cincinnati, Tennessee, and Miami. Now, at least Tennessee should provide at least some, production on offense to force them into pass. We'll see what Cincinnati can do as well. Miami, we'll see where they're at in a few weeks, like if they can actually muster up some sort of production and keep them in a passing script. Hopefully, I say it like they might win, but it might be an ugly win, and it might not, force them to pass a lot. But I think your point is well taken, that if they're going to continue to be forced into these negative game scripts, Marvin Jones is definitely going to be that guy that's going to be taking some of those deep passes, catching it, or at least receiving a lot of those air yards, turn them into receiving yards, and that's what we want for fantasy purposes. So yeah, Marvin Jones, again, one of my Bengals guys that I wish was still a part of Cincinnati's offense, but alas, we can't even.
Long time ago,
we can't even. No, see, I can't, man. I'm still stuck on AJ Green being gone, man. I can't even let him go. And it's only been it hadn't even been a year.
Let him go.
He's like one of the best, like Victoria. He's one of the best. But all right. Before I get upset, I got to woosah and let that one go. I mean, but yeah, I completely understand. But all right, so if we're not doing, we're not caring about like Shenault, not caring about Chark, I guess this next question actually kind of falls right into what we were talking about. So this is from Trey W, talking about who we're starting at flex. So we've got Marvin Jones. We were just talking about him. We're talking about him, Sanders, Devonta Smith, Darnell Mooney, Tim Patrick, who actually popped up on the injury report as well. And of course, Cordell Patterson, who actually took a Wildcat snap for the Falcons this past week. Let's not even get into that. But Victoria, I'll kick it to you first. I mean, out of that list of guys, running back, at least a running back, and then also a few wide receivers. Who you be starting at flex this week?
Ooh, I think I'd eliminate Mooney, Patrick, and Patterson.
Okay.
I think I'd be between Marvin Jones, Sanders, and Smith, because actually Miles Sanders has looked pretty good. Who knew that a rushing quarterback could open up the rushing game? Now let's talk about last week's Eagles game, though, and let's not talk about it too much, but nobody could get anything going. That was a little scary. So that scares me a little bit. But Monday Night Football, Dallas and Philly, this game could pop. I'm very, very excited. There's a lot of fantasy pieces within that game. So I'm okay starting Sanders or Smith. If I have to go for it, we've already talked about Marvin Jones. I think he'll give you a solid floor. They're going to have to keep up with Arizona this week. But, Miles Sanders might give you the highest floor here because Devontae Smith kind of disappeared a little bit last week. That was just horrendous game script, though. But he has been in week 1. He was a reliable option for Jalen Hurts. I think I'd go Miles Sanders here. That's really, really tough, though. And it also doesn't say if it's PPR or not. That might change my
That
mind
might
a
change
little
things.
bit.
I assume it's all PPR. I don't know how
Yeah,
people
that's
play.
true.
If you're playing standard, that's totally fine. I just think PPR is better.
No, it's not
Yeah.
totally fine. It's 2021. Get out of that standard stuff. I mean,
Man,
it's
I'm trying
PPR.
to
Come
I'm
on.
trying to cater to all of our audience. Whoever plays
That's
standard,
fair. That's
I don't
fair.
play it, but I'm rooting for you if you still play it.
Got you. I got you. But no, I think Victoria, your point is well taken. I think out of any of those games that are game environments that are listed there, the Philadelphia Dallas game I think pops the most. I mean, but Troy, do you agree with that? I mean, are you looking to either one of those Eagles options in this list, or are you looking elsewhere?
I'm going to look elsewhere, and so the Dallas Philly game should be a good game. But what I've noticed about a lot of in division games is they don't always go the way that we think.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're more low scoring. It's weird. Even bad defenses sometimes show out when it comes to
except for last Thursday with the Giants in Washington.
Okay,
What
yeah.
happened? That was wild.
That was
I'm
wild. That was
sorry.
wild.
Yeah,
That's not the norm. That's especially on Thursday night. The games are
those
not that
those
good.
island games. Yeah, you can't count those.
Yeah, but here's the thing. So Dallas, look, it could be high scoring, but I'm going to say Marvin Jones, the guy we just talked about.
Yeah.
You know what? Just like I was saying, Jaguars are going to have to pass a lot, and they're going against the Cardinals. We already know how high-powered that Cardinals offense is. They're going to be putting a lot of points against the Jaguars defense, which means that the Jaguars are going to have to throw a lot. And we already talked about how Marvin Jones is their wide receiver one. Yes, I know Devonta Smith is the Eagles' wide receiver one, but to me, again, the Jaguars are the 6th ranked passing offense in the league. Give me Marvin Jones in this particular case.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, but now, Troy, I'll ask you this. I mean, could you see a scenario where both Devonta Smith and Marvin Jones, they wind up with just a similar amount of points at the end of week 3? I think it's at least within the realm of possibility, right?
No, I believe absolutely that could happen. For me, that's the way I see the games going. Look, just in division games just normally don't go, just like we were just talking about. We were shocked about how the game went on Thursday. In division games, I feel like are some of the most unpredictable games for whatever reason. I don't know, just because it's more competitive. I don't know because they mean more in division. They just normally don't go the way that we plan. I'm hoping it's a shootout, and I'm hoping I'm wrong, and Devonta Smith outscores everybody. But I believe that I'm more confident in the way that the Cardinals-Jaguar game is going to go versus the Philadelphia Cowboys game.
That's true. And we can definitely, it's hard enough for us to figure out any particular game by itself. Those in-division games, we really can't know how they'll go, but we do know how this show is going to go. We're going to do just nothing but ask questions and or at least have the folks that ask us questions. We'll get the answers to you as quickly as possible here on the Mailbag Show tonight. Like I mentioned beforehand, if you got questions for next week, go ahead and send them to the email address mailbag@footballguys.com. You got questions for us tonight? I see folks talking there in the chat. Drop us any of your questions there. We'll get to those here in about 10-15 minutes or so. We've got about 5 or 6 more questions to go. We'll talk through those and hit y'all up here in the chat here in just a few minutes. All right, so moving on. All right, this one should be fairly simplistic looking at the list right here. So from Brian here, full PPR. So now he's specified. Let us know it's a PPR league. Now he's got Rondale Moore, Jamar Chase, or Tyson Williams to choose for his flex position. Now, Troy, I'll kick it back to you real quick. Out of those 3 guys, I mean, who are you choosing out of those?
This is easy. I won't take long. Jamar Chase, not even close for me.
Not even close. Man, like Rondale, like he just had 114 yards and a touchdown. Like not even close.
You're right. Rondale, he had a great game, but the problem is he's the wide receiver 2, 3 on this team. Look, Max Williams got 7 targets, right? So
you're right.
We don't know, and again, so we don't know how consistently Rondale doesn't need a lot of targets to do his thing, but I know that Jamar Chase is the wide receiver 1 on his team. Tyson Williams, he has maybe like a 7% target share. The Ravens don't throw the ball, especially they don't throw the ball that much to their running back, so he's not even consideration here. Give me Chase.
Yeah, in a full PPR league, I couldn't advocate for starting a running back at the flex position. I mean, unless you're just completely loaded. I mean, I just couldn't really see how you would start a running back there. So either way, I think either one of those wide receivers. And again, I'll try and stay neutral as possible because again, I'm not going to say Chase because y'all just be like, well, you're a Bengals fan, so you can't do it anyway. But Victoria, where are you at with these 3?
I mean, I could make the case for pushing Rondale in there if you have him. You probably just picked him up off waivers this week. You're excited. And we just talked about how we think that Arizona Jags game might be high flying, high scoring.
Over Chase? Nah.
I'm trying to go on I'm trying to give a well-rounded answer here. You already gave Jamar your case for Jamar Chase. We talked about that Steelers D. I think they can overcome it. That also might be a low-scoring game. Pittsburgh's D is good, and just the way Cincinnati played last week was not great. Garbage time might be there. I think Rondell would probably give you the highest ceiling here, but he also can give you a very low floor. He increased his snaps almost twofold from week 1 to week 2. He has, I think, 36 touches and almost the same amount of fantasy points to his touches, so that's pretty dope. I mean, I could understand why you'd want to start him this week, and I think Chase is the safer option, but I mean, I can understand if you'd be excited to start Rondell. I'm debating starting him this week, not gonna lie. So.
No, that's fair. And actually, so quick question to both of y'all. And now that I read through this list real quick, I mean, what type of wide receivers does this dude have that he's considering flexing Jamar Chase? Like, think about that. Like, who does he have in front of him that he
maybe went 0 wide receiver?
Right. Like maybe he has like Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams or something like that. And then now he's thinking about flexing. I was just looking at it like, man, like he really must be loaded at the wide receiver position if you're even thinking about flexing Chase to begin with. I would almost think that where he was drafted at and where most folks have him on their rosters, he's probably at the least a locked in wide receiver 2 on your squad. But man, they must have a pretty solid roster if he has to consider, I mean, flexing him or flexing Chase at this point, but I get it. I get
first world problems for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that is, I mean, he must have a very nice roster. But moving on to some other folks that might have some difficult roster questions, and this comes from friend of the show, Herms. I mean, Javonte Williams, Cordero Patterson as the RB2 for this week. Victoria, how are you looking at those two? Well, at least one, a traditional running back, and the other one, a converted running back for the Falcons. I mean, where are you at with this one?
Yeah, this is tough. Javonte is looking good. He's essentially splitting snaps with Gordon, and he has a little bit more on the productivity side, which is wild. The problem is Denver is having difficulty moving the ball on the ground. And I don't think he's caught as many passes as Gordon has. I think PPR, I would lean toward Patterson. Patterson looked good last week through the air. He didn't look great on the ground, wasn't efficient on the ground at all, but through the air, he had 5 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown, and he might be pulling away from Mike Davis sooner than later, which stinks for Mike Davis drafters. But I'm not there yet with starting Javonte. I think he's got a lower floor than Patterson, especially PPR. Patterson could catch another 5 balls and give you a nice floor here, especially if this is your RB2, Herms. Okay. I'm still going Patterson. Here. Okay.
Yeah, I actually don't mind that. I mean, now, are we going to consider Cordero Patterson a weekly RB2 option? Probably not. I mean, are we really seeing like him having the standalone value on a week-to-week basis? At least I'm not there yet, at least in my thought process, looking at the situation. I mean, he did look great in week 2. Again, we talked about earlier with him having that wildcat option, even though it didn't convert, but he actually got like I think the first or second red zone touch, like for the Falcons once they got inside scoring position. Also being used in the passing game as well as a traditional wide receiver. So he gets enough touches, and he also has that upside and the speed still that he could wind up being that punch that you need at the RB2 position. But Troy, how are you looking at it?
So in terms of targets, Javonte is pretty much non-existent. If I'm looking at these stats right, he only has 2 targets on the season.
It's not great.
Not great. And Cordell Patterson has 8 targets. So PPR, I love that Javonte split in. He's pretty much splitting 50-50 with Gordon.
Right.
But I feel like if he doesn't score a touchdown, Javonte's going to kill you. And again, I feel like Javonte, once he takes over the job, he's going to be balling. But give me Cordell Patterson. At least I know, and we know Atlanta's defense is also horrible. So they're going to also have to pass. And Cordell, it's funny. I think Mike Davis actually happens to have more targets than Cordell on this season, but that's neither here or there. I'll still take Patterson.
All right. So I'll put this out there and let y'all think about it real quick. Now, does it change your minds that Javonte Williams is facing the Jets defense this week? Did it change your minds at all?
The Jets defense actually isn't that as bad as we think it is. I think
Yeah,
it might be like the
I
10th
agree.
ranked
Just want to
defense
throw it
or
out there.
something like that.
I had to throw it out there.
I know Atlanta's the worst defense. So
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I agree.
Had to throw that one out there because I know folks will look at that matchup and they'll be like, oh, Broncos are going to beat them up. Teddy Two Gloves going to drop 3 touchdowns on them. Javonte's going to just, completely salt that game away. 60 yards and a touchdown. Let's just go ahead and count it right now. And then, that's how Javonte's going to make his hay. I can just see folks thinking that.
We thought that last week, though. We thought Javonte and Gordon would be smash plays last week, and neither of them turned out to give us any value. So that kind of makes me a little, definitely, especially in PPR. I'm taking Patterson here because of that.
I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of folks that might have Javonte on their roster and thinking that might be a possibility for them. But all right, but I think I agree with y'all too. I think it's more of like if you're looking for that upside and for that punch, we already know that Patterson has that in his bag of tricks. Already getting that workload to get him there as well. So I think for me, I do lean CPAT at least for this week. We'll see how things go on for the rest of the season, but. All right. So we got a couple more questions here on the mailbag show tonight, and then we'll start going through the chat, seeing what questions y'all might have before we get on out of here tonight. But our next question, this might be, I think it's a little easier for me personally looking at this one, but from Tyler O. Victoria, I'll kick it to you first. Tony Pollard or Javonte Williams, half-point PPR?
Pollard is looking like an every week start. I know it's early and that it might be early to say that, but since 2019, Tony Pollard, second in yards after contact, second in missed tackles forced per rush, like yards after the catch for receptions. He is fantastic. He has 23 touches so far this season, 183 yards and a touchdown. I think he can give you a very decent floor from week to week versus we just talked about Javonte. This is definitely easy, but he's overtaking. I mean, him and Zeke are not splitting 50-50, but Pollard, when he's on the field, is looking a little more efficient. And I think he's going against stacked boxes less than Zeke is. I think I read that earlier this week too. So he's just probably having an easier time, but he's making the most of his touches.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could objectively, folks that watch that game against the Chargers, there's no way you could sit back, watch that game and say Zeke was the better runner in that game. You just can't do it. And this is from, I was one of those folks that was kind of hammering Zeke in those first 3 to 5 picks and seeing okay, well, he's going to have that workload. He should have that target share. But no, Tony Pollard is the one that's really taking that on. So, Troy, where are you sitting at if you had to look at those two and make a decision?
T, you're on mute.
Mute.
My bad. So Pollard, he is playing only 28% of snaps. So here's the thing. But he has 7 targets on the season. So he's very, very in the passing game. So it's more this is tough because Javonte is getting a lot more work than Pollard is. So really, but obviously Javonte's not getting catches. Pollard is. I think I'll lean Pollard. He's kind of like the Kareem Hunt role. The way I see it is kind of like Zeke is Chubb, Pollard's Kareem Hunt in a little bit of a way, except for Hunt plays more snaps. But I'll play Pollard reluctantly just because he has looked good. From the eye test, he did look a little bit more explosive in some ways than Zeke. I'm not taking him over Zeke. He's not the better running back than Zeke, but he did look better last week than Zeke. But I'll go Pollard. I feel gross saying it, but I'm going to go Pollard.
Touch count is definitely tightened between the two over the last couple of weeks. And I would say the big thing for me that put Pollard well over Javonte for me, the first second I look at this question was the manufactured touches in the red zone for Tony Pollard. When he got that jet sweep for that touchdown that he took, it's a wrap for me. Because even if something doesn't happen to Zeke, he has at least that standalone value on a week-to-week basis that we're not seeing that same design creativity like in Denver for Javonte Williams. They know what they have. Don't get me wrong. Denver knows what they have with Javonte Williams. And as soon as they're ready to, make that swap, move on from Melvin Gordon, let Javonte take the reins, they know what they have in him. But Kellen Moore digging into his bag of tricks in the first 2 weeks and designing up jet sweeps for Tony Pollard, yeah, sign me up for that. In what actually shapes up as a similar matchup to what Dallas had faced with the Chargers. Chargers have a decent defensive front. Eagles also have that too. So I could see Zeke having like similar issues on the ground, and then them having to flip over to Tony Pollard because we know he's the more explosive runner. We know he's the one that can hit the edge much faster and easier than Zeke can at this point in his career. So I would say, give me, I know it's half point PPR, so you're not going to be able to rely on some of those targets and receptions as much as you could if it was full PPR. But still, go ahead and give me Tony Pollard in this. I'll take the upside on this one. And then now that I said that, Javonte Williams is going to run for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I 100% understand. All right, a couple more questions on the mailbag show tonight. Appreciate y'all kicking with us before we head on over to the chat and see what y'all have for us. Oh, okay. So Z2 Fantasy asking us, are we scared for Alvin Kamara going forward, or will that offense correct? Because we saw the highs in week 1. We saw the absolute lows, and Jameis turn into old Jameis, pre-LASIK Jameis on Sunday. So, Troy, how are you looking at Alvin Kamara? I mean, after a lot of folks were saying like he should be the 102 right behind CMC, didn't look like it. So where are you at now with Kamara?
He is going to be just fine. Z2. You don't worry about it. Look, every running back, look, sometimes you have off weeks. I am not worried about Alvin Kamara at all. He is going to be just fine. I'm gonna leave it at that. Again, not every look. We look at the Derrick Henry week 1 and look at him week 2. Elite running backs, look, they're gonna have off weeks, right? So relax. He's going to be just fine. He's Alvin Kamara. Again, the whole Saints offense looked absolute garbage last week. I don't expect them to look absolute garbage for the rest of the season. He'll be just fine.
I think that's where folks should be at right now, because they go from what did Jameis had 5 touchdowns on like 20 passes in week 1,
like 100 yards.
Yeah, which didn't even make sense to begin with. And then this week he essentially goes back to his old self with 2-3 interceptions as well. So it's like that offense should really be somewhere in the middle for the whole season. So Victoria, I mean, should that be how folks look at their offense moving forward, or where you at?
Yeah, I'm not hitting the panic button, and not yet at all. He'll be just fine. And I think that we had to also take in consideration that the Saints were down a few players on defense because of COVID. They had a bunch of their coaches weren't allowed to be on the sidelines. Like, it was just a wacky day all around. I don't want to throw out that game completely, because I do think the Panthers defense is, maybe we underestimated the Panthers defense a little bit here for this year. I think they're good. So I don't want to throw the whole game out, but I'm not worried at all about Kamara. They need to get their best playmaker involved. They've got no one else of his caliber. He will bounce back just fine.
Right. I mean, if you think about offenses that really need their playmakers to step up, you want to give them that opportunity. Who outside of Alvin Kamara is really going to do it for them? Are we really going to go back to Adam Troutman again? I mean, even though he's from Dayton and that's where I live at, but still, I mean, but it's not Deontay Harris. Marquez Callaway is already flamed out in week 2. Only has like 3-4 targets. And even though folks were insisting that he was going to be their wide receiver 1 outside of Michael Thomas, I mean, I bought into that as well. So that's fine. Yeah. I'll take that L. But I think that is important to realize. I mean, running backs are going to have their up and down weeks. I mean, Troy, you laid out the perfect example about Derrick Henry in week 1 and then watching him turn back into the big dog against Seattle in week 2. So I think folks just take a step back. You know the type of player that you drafted when you picked up Alvin Kamara. You know the type of targets that he's going to get. So I'm 100% with you. Let's go and wait. See how this next their matchup this coming week turns out. I think Kamara will be back to form like right after that. And all right, so one more for us before we kick it over to the chat and see what's going on. This other one also from Tyler O. Thoughts on rostering Michael Carter in 10-team PPR leagues? Now, I mean, it's the Jets. Are we really that sold on the Jets after a poor performance in against New England this past week? I mean, Victoria, I mean, where are you at with Michael Carter? I mean, worth a stash at this point, or are you just trying to avoid any player that has the NYJ like tag on him?
I think in a 10-team league, I don't think I'm rostering him quite yet. I think maybe you put him on you're interested in your flag list and keep an eye, but in a 10-team league, there's got to be a different running back on the waiver wire that you could take a shot on. I mean, I don't know about everyone's leagues, but is a guy like Pollard still on your waiver wire? Is a guy like Cordell Patterson still there? I think I'd rather take the shot on a guy like that than putting Michael Carter on my bench, unless you slotted Antonio Brown into your IR spot this week and you want to throw Carter on your bench just for this 1 week stash and see how he performs, that kind of thing. That's fine with me, but I'm not sure I don't want to say wasting a bench spot on it, but I'd rather try to have, like I said, one of those running backs or a higher caliber wide receiver. The wide receivers on your waiver wire could be Michael Pittman or somebody like that who you want to wait and see because Wentz likely isn't playing this week. But somebody like that has just a higher ceiling than Carter at this point, I think I'd rather throw in my roster.
Yeah, 2 key points I think that you put out there was that one, in a 10-teamer, there has to be other options. I mean, of course, unless you're playing in a deep bench league or something like that, multiple IR spots or whatever the case may be. I mean, that might not work out for you. But I would think there might be another running back out there that would at least offer a bit more upside than Michael Carter. I mean, don't get me wrong. We saw his target share increase in week 2. It already looks like they're trying to phase out Tevin Coleman, which we expected to happen at some point during the year anyway. So I get the allure, but man, I mean, Troy, would you ever feel comfortable starting a Jets running back? I mean, in the year of our Lord 2021, are we really starting a Jets running back? I just can't see myself doing it.
No.
That's easy. That's easy it is. Yep. That's easy it is.
In the 10-team, just like you said, in the 10-team league, there's no reason. Again, if you have a deep bench, put him on your bench. The best that he's going to be is a flex. Please, I pray he's not your RB2 in a 10-team league. Then it means a lot has gone wrong. But yes, you don't really need Michael Carter in the 10-team league.
No, at least I can't advocate for it. I mean, if you want to stash him and see how things go, I mean, of course, there are worse roster cloggers that you could possibly have. So I get it. But no, I just can't see myself doing that. But we'll see if any of that news drops and if any of that anything does change. Of course, I mean, Victoria, tell them about the news update that they could get or email update they could get from our own Joe Bryant if they decide to sign up for it.
Absolutely. You need to sign up for the Footballguys daily email update if you haven't already. Every single day, Joe Bryant brings us all of the latest from footballguys.com, the news, the transactions, the rumors, any injury updates, all of our articles that went live that day, all of our shows that can help you win your league from our own Footballguys staff in the daily email update. I read it every single day. It is just a couple minutes of your day. You get all the relevant news that you can stay up on your league mates, get an edge on them and know what's going on. And you don't have to spend too much time doing it because we do the work for you. So make sure you sign up for the Footballguys daily email update.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. All right, y'all. So we're going to go ahead and hop into the chat real quick. I've seen a number of questions like scrolling by. I'm going to go all the way back up to the top, see how many we can get to. Troy, I'll kick it to you first with this one. Robert Woods. I mean, are you scared for Robert Woods? We talked about CEH and panic on him. Are you hitting the panic button on Robert Woods?
Robert Woods, he'll be just fine. I believe he ran almost as many routes as Cooper Kupp last week. And I believe he played almost as many snaps as Cooper Kupp last week. Week 1 was terrifying. Like that was complete. If week 2 looked like week 1, then I would be a lot more scared. But week 2 was a lot better for Woods. He'll be just fine.
Right. And I think with what are you supposed to do if Cooper Kupp is streaking down the field completely by himself? I mean, what's Matthew Stafford going to do? Try and force some more targets to Robert Woods? It's just not going to happen. Victoria, how are you looking at this one?
Agree completely. We just watched the Cowboys put a ton of points on the Bucs and even the Falcons. A lot of Falcons players had a good day. I think this might be Woods' bounce back game this week against the Bucs while they're centering in on Kupp.
I think so. I'm hoping that's the case. All right, kicking on. We talked about some of the issues with Pittsburgh, or at least that matchup when we're talking about Cincinnati. I mean, Claypool, startable as a flex. I know that Big Ben's hurt. O-line is trash. I mean, Victoria, how are you looking at Claypool as a possible flex with Deontay out?
Exactly. You mentioned it. You hit the nail on the head. I'm watching for Deontay Johnson's status this week. He injured his knee on the last play of the game. Just horrible, did not need to happen. But if Deontay is out, I think Claypool's a fine flex option. Other than that, I'm looking to see who I can put in other than Claypool because he's scaring me. He's getting those downfield targets, but he only seems to be connecting on a few of them, 1 or 2 per game with Big Ben, and you need those long plays and a touchdown to get some production from him. So if you have someone else that's getting you a higher floor, I would go for it. Keep an eye on Deontay Johnson, though.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I'm with that as well. Like Claypool, while everybody likes that archetype of receiver, right? The guy that we know has the long speed, can play multiple spots, in the formations. I mean, has also that ability to be used as a runner out of the backfield. I love all of that. But Troy, can we trust any of that even if it is hurt Big Ben or possibly Mason Rudolph, Dwayne Haskins under center on Sunday, I don't think I could do it without knowing more about that situation.
I need to know more about that situation, but Claypool has about like a 20% target share. He's averaging about 7 targets a game. So like last year, the O-line was horrible last year. Big Ben was still kind of old, lame Big Ben last year, and they got it done. So I don't see why this year is going to be that much different. Yeah, they haven't been connecting the first 2 games, but like Claypool doesn't need a whole lot of opportunities. He really just needs one. He can take it to the house. He's a big play guy. He has I think he's almost like top 5 in air yards. If he's not top 5 in air yards on the season, I'm confident in him going forward. I'd start him at flex, but yeah, Big Ben status is definitely playing a factor in that for me this week.
Cool. All right, let's go ahead and pick an RB and 2 flexes. This is full PPR. We've got Javonte Williams, James White, Pollard, Hendo, DJ Chark, and Rondale Moore. Troy, I'll kick it to you first. I mean, out of all those guys, give me 3 that stick out to you.
James White, Tony Pollard, and Daryl Henderson. Oh man, wait, Daryl Henderson's kind of banged up, so I don't even know if what's his status. So because of that, James White, Tony Pollard, Rondale Moore.
Yep, I think that was my knee-jerk reaction as well. Victoria, where are you at with this one?
I agree too. You got to keep an eye on the status of Henderson because he's been productive when he's in, but they could limit him because of that injury. So I'm with you guys on that. Take the safe route.
All right, we'll hit a couple more before we get on out tonight here on the Mailbag Show. So let's see. Looking at Justin Fields this week, we'll see if he can wind up being the Konami Code quarterback that we expect him to be. Victoria, do you think he's going to ball out, or we just have to wait another week and hopefully Matt Nagy commits to him as their starter?
Well, the Browns defense has not looked too great the last couple of weeks. I don't know if our expectations need to be that he's going to ball out. Let's keep our expectations a little bit low, then maybe we'll be surprised, right? I definitely picked him up off of waivers when I heard the news this morning, just in case. I don't have a rushing QB, so I thought, well, maybe he can give us a higher floor, right? Definitely keep an eye on this. I did drop Tannehill, I will say, sir, who asked this question. I dropped Tannehill for Fields. Now, that's a little bit spicy, but I did it. So if you're feeling spicy, I would, if you wanted to drop someone, I would drop Tannehill there over Carr.
No, I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. Troy, where are you at? Do you think Fields could be a good, at the very least, a good streaming option for week 3?
He's definitely a good streaming option, but I don't think he's going to necessarily ball out with passing. It's his rushing, right? You're really playing him because of his rushing floor. We've seen him rush a lot. I think he has his moments, but he doesn't look extremely polished, and that's fine. He's a rookie, but the times that he's been starting, he's made mistakes. Again, he made rookie mistakes, so you're relying on him rushing the ball. So if you want to play him, that's fine. I don't think he's just going to, be throwing for 300 yards and he's going to look like, Justin Herbert of last year. But again, you're playing him. You're hoping that he's similar to Jalen Hurts, right? In terms of his rushing floor. And that's really what you want from him. But I think he'll be just fine this week. Right.
All right. So last one, we'll do it real quick. So this one might be a tough one for a couple of folks. And actually, I might have a similar question myself. So PPR, RB2, Eli Mitchell or Tony Pollard. Troy, where are you at with this one?
Give me Mitchell. I think I'm gonna go Mitchell.
Okay. Okay. All right. So Victoria, it sounds like you disagree. Nah. So are you going with Pollard?
Yes, sir. Nah, all day. This guy's shoulder is gonna fall off. He might not even play.
They have no other running backs on the roster. They just signed Chris
they
Thompson.
do. They're just bringing in people off the street.
Everyone else is in the hospital. Okay, he's the only one left. So
Trey Sermon is in concussion protocol. He has a shot.
Exactly. Everyone else is in the hospital. That's why I'm going Eli Mitchell.
You going to Eli Mitchell? Okay, I would say I'm still going with Tony Pollard. I'm still stuck on that game. That's probably going to be my downfall because I'm thinking that game is going to shoot out. I think Tony Pollard is going to be the one that's going to be taking more of those manufactured touches to the house. So I lean Tony Pollard, but I understand the thought process behind starting Eli Mitchell because at the very least we know he's going to get that workload. Because with all the other running backs that are hurt right now, Mitchell should at least have that workload to give him a safe floor. Tony Pollard is the one that provides you that ceiling for sure. So, all right, before we take too much more of your night, we appreciate y'all coming out. Thank you for tuning in to tonight's Mailbag Show. much love and appreciation to Troy, Victoria for providing most of the work here. I'm just your humble host, Chris Allen, sitting in for Dave Kluge, who's out on assignment tonight. He should be back next week, Wednesday, 7:30 Eastern. Go and check us out. Again, subscribe, hit that like button and all that here at YouTube Footballguys TV, all that stuff. You can find all the rest of our shows, Audible, Dynasty newsletter, so on and so forth. Check that out. Subscribe to those, and we'll catch y'all next week.